Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining in. And when Ranjit sir was telling me initially about the time, I was impressed with how, a lot of you have joined in at 8 o'clock in the night. So I really appreciate that. So I'll be talking about solution-focused therapy, which is an area that I've been passionate about since the time that I did my MPhil. My MPhil was on solution-focused therapy. Recently, we are not being able to practice as much as we would want to, but then again, better than nothing. So what I plan to do here is give a brief introduction about what SFBT is, and also what are some of the techniques that we could use, and also a brief comparison about how is it different or similar to the other psychotherapies that are around. And it will also be good if we can have doubts coming whichever. So if you have any doubts in between, feel free to stop me and then ask the doubts then and there. And also obviously after the session that I do, you can ask for clarifications, because theoretically solution focused therapy is one of the simplest therapies, but when it comes to the implementation, we have realized that it's not that simple. So those are going to be my agenda for today. Yes? Yes, I got a yes. Great. So I'll share my screen. We can start off from there. Okay. Yes. So first, like I mentioned, we'll start off with the history because it's important to know where we come from. So solution-focused therapy was developed by someone named Steve DeShasser and his partner Insu Kimberg, along with their colleagues, which was sometime in the late 1970s in Wisconsin. So initially, solution-focused therapy came from the background of family therapy, and you'll also see how it came about. So initially, it was, if you notice our historical considerations, it was mostly individualistic, and we focused more on the medical model and all that. But in family therapy, one cannot do that. We have to look at the interpersonal factors and what could be the other measures one can take. So once when Steve DeShasser and Insu Kimberg, along with their colleagues, when they were dealing with the family, they realized that the family had a lot of issues. Considering that most of the families have issues, this was a little bit more than what they had imagined. And it was some 27 number of problems that they had listed out. And it turned out to be quite a challenging case. And then they decided that, okay, looking at the problems and trying to find solutions for that may not be the best way to go about it. And they suggested the family to come up with things that they would want more to happen rather than talking about the things that are happening wrong right now. And when that happened, and when the family was able to list out things that they would want to happen, that is how the team realized that there are other ways of solving problems rather than looking at the problem and talking more about it. So that's how SFBT, or solution focused therapy, came into being. And it is more future focused. But again, I would like to repeat that it's not that we don't talk about the past, or it's not that we negate the influence of past altogether. It's just that what happened, it happened. But focusing more on the future and what is it that the client can do about it is something that comes about in SFBT. So it's more future focused, it's more goal directed, and we focus more on the solutions rather than looking at how did the client end up where they are right now. So it's more competency based and it's resource based model, which talks about it doesn't talk much about the past failings and the problems that the client would have had. Again, caveat, it's not that we are not talking about it at all, but only to the extent that the client wants to talk about it or the client feels the need to talk about it. So there is no inferences that we are going to derive from what the client would be trying to tell, considering that would be again different from the psychodynamic approaches that we would have used. So here we focus more on client strengths and what could have been the client's previous and also the future successes that we are anticipating. And the goals, and this is extremely important, the goals are selected by the client. So there may be times when we feel that the client would benefit from some other goals, but it would be definitely up to the client to decide and tell us. Obviously, we are going to assist, but it's never the job of the clinician to decide what would be the best possible goal for the client. And we also believe that in SFBT that clients have enough and more resources to come up with their own solutions for the problems that they're facing. It's just that currently they're subjectively involved in an issue and they're not able to look at alternatives, or they need support in coming up with what is it that they already have inside. And here again, even in the goal, when we have already decided on the goal, we promote more of small, specific, and incremental changes rather than just one huge attaining of the goal. So this is a basic introduction to SFBT. Now, historically, if you look at it, there have been different waves of therapies, right? So initially, as as a profession, we started off with the psychodynamic approaches. Then we had the behavioral, the cognitive behavioral, and currently we have the whole existential thing going on. So that also paved the way for SFBT to come about. As you can see, I will also be talking about it a bit in detail later, where SFBT has its roots mostly in strengths-based approach and positive psychology and all that, because it was the perfect time for SFBT to come about also. So these factors also sort of helped SFBT to come about. And initially, so like I said, started off as a family therapy intervention. So it was more of problem resolution approach. Again, even that time, it was not focusing on problems per se, but how is it that the problem can be solved? So in that way, initially, historically, that time SFBT did focus a bit on what the client is coming up with, as in the problems. But as years went on, the SFBT started focusing only on the solutions, and again, as to what is it that the client needs. And here, exceptions are important. I will be talking about it a bit later, where exceptions is a specific technique in solution-focused therapy, where we try to look at what could have been the other things that are happening in the client's life. Again, like how I was telling earlier, we genuinely believe that clients are experts in their life, and we give a lot of credit to the ability of the client to solve their own issues. So there is a lot of social work implications that you can find out of client-centered way of looking at things. Now, some of the basic assumptions of SFBT are enlisted here, and so the first thing that as an SFBT practitioner would believe is that change is constant and it is inevitable. So it is in no way saying that life is going to be a bed of roses. So things are going to happen, but how do you cope up with it, or what is it that you can do to sort of ensure that you are not making a life more difficult than it's supposed to be? And the other assumption that we believe in, small changes can result in bigger changes. So incremental things that I was talking about earlier. And again, since you can't change the past, so again, I repeat, it's not that we are negating the influence of the past and how we are sort of, defined by what has happened in our past, but we are trying to actively focus on the autonomy of the client to bring about different outcomes. So since we can't change the past, we can concentrate on the future and how things can be done better by doing different things in the present. And how I was telling earlier, we do believe that resources necessary to solve the problems are already within the clients, and they are the experts of their own life. And just because a person has been working in the mental health field for a longer period of time does not mean that every client will be the same. So we would have a client, it can be an individual, group, or a family coming up with similar issues, but it can never be the same. It can never be that two individuals, even with the same diagnosis or same set of issues, are going through the same exact experiences. So the uniqueness of the individual, again, the client-centered way of looking at things is something that is extremely important in solution-focused therapy, or solution-focused therapy for that matter. And every problem has at least one exception. So exceptions are extremely important whenever we are dealing with a client using SFBT, where regardless of how severe the problem is or how difficult it looks like at the moment, every problem is going to have at least one exception. So let's say a client says that I have trouble getting up early in the morning, and I find it difficult and I'm getting late every day for work and all that. So our job as a clinician would be to check as to, when they say always, it's never always. So is it that there have been times when they have woken up earlier? Let's say, since we are based in Bangalore, so let's say that they wanted to go to Nandi Hills and see the sunrise. So that time where they able to get up early in the morning. So if that's the case, that's an exception of them saying that I can never get up early in the morning, right? So every problem has at least one exception is something that solution focused practitioners believe in. And there is also this assumption that it may not be that it's always therapy. So one of the things you'll find that the word brief, it's usually 3 to 5 sessions that we're looking at for any solution focused brief therapy interventions. And it's, even if we say 3 to 5, it is always assumed that the first session that we have with the client can most probably be the last also. As in, we always take it as just one session and we try to see what is the client bringing and whether we can sort of help the client in that session itself. And we also believe, like how I was saying, it may not be that it's always therapy. You know, one can do wonders with proper social support, and we as social workers would know that we can do wonders with social support and a lot of policy changes and all that. So those are some of the basic assumptions of SFBT. And here I am going to talk a bit more about what are the specific techniques that we can use, right? So the first technique, or something that is going to be very useful, is something called pre-session change. As in, this can be in the context of either the client has booked an appointment and they are planning to start session with us, or it can be that the client was referred from elsewhere, maybe a colleague of ours, or it was mandated that the client comes to us for therapy. Even regardless of the context, there is a time period between the client deciding to come for therapy and actually attending the session. So that is something we look for in the pre-session change question. So we ask as to what changes have you noticed that have happened or started to happen since you called to make the appointment for this session. Now, the intention behind this question is that whenever we go through something very difficult in life, there is a sense of helplessness and hopelessness that comes in. And as human beings, we are not really wired to handle uncertainty very well. One of the reasons that we resort to a lot of things we shouldn't be doing, because we can't really handle uncertainty. And regardless of how illogical it seems for the other person, it is important for us as human beings to come up with a theory as to why something is happening. Now, the fact that the client decided to come for a session, or the fact that the client has this plan made that, okay, oh my God, I have to attend the session even if it is mandated, the fact is they are not feeling helpless anymore. Again, they're not really sure how the session would go, but they have taken an active measure to sort of do something about what they're going through. Now, that is, so how did it feel for the client is something that we are trying to gauge through this question. And this can also give us a bit of insight into how were the previous sessions for them with other people, if they have had, or what are the other measures that they've taken, or did they feel more helpless, or so it gives us more clarity as to how to go about the session in itself. Now, it is important for any therapy for that matter to have specific goals, even more so in solution-focused therapy, because like how I was mentioning earlier, the more specific the goal, the better is what solution-focused therapists believe. So setting very personal, salient, and clear, specific, and obviously attainable goals are extremely important in SFBT. And like how I was telling earlier, smaller goals, better. And clients are expected to come up with their own goals, and it should be about the presence of something. So for example, if we were to ask someone, what would you want? Or what is it that you're expecting out of the session? Or if life was different, what would it be and all that? Most of the time, as not just clients, as in general, people have a tendency to say that I wish this was not happening, right? So I wish that, my husband was more understanding. I wish that my husband would stop yelling at me and all those things. But if we are looking at it from more of the solution focused perspective, it would bring the focus back to the client as to how the client would feel if the things that they want are happening or if it were to happen. So we bring the focus back to the client, and also we look for the presence of something rather than the absence of something, right? Now, the miracle question, again, a caveat, this is very culturally important because not everyone would benefit from the miracle question. So we only use miracle questions if you have not been able to come up with a goal. So we have been talking to the client, we have been having sessions, or we did everything we could, but we are not really sure what is it that the client expects out of the session. And let's say the client is also in a place where they are not able to articulate properly, or in a position where they're able to share a lot of things, then miracle question can be useful. Now, again, it is up to the clinician to decide which client to use and which client not to, because if a person is extremely logical, logical, I'm using it in a very generic sense, where they are not able to visualize a lot of things, then the miracle question may not give the same result as it would with someone who is a bit more introspective and imaginative. So the miracle question, again, tries to bring about the goal, and it goes like this. Now, I want to ask you a strange question. Suppose that while you're sleeping tonight and a miracle happens, the miracle is that the problem which brought you here is solved. However, because you're sleeping, you don't know that the miracle has happened. So when you wake up tomorrow morning, what will be different that will tell you that a miracle has happened and the problem which brought you here is solved? Now, again, the focus would be on the client. Again, we're saying the same example that I was telling earlier, the husband one. Now, let's say the client says that if the miracle has happened, when I wake up, my husband won't be shouting. Or it says that the husband will be helping out with my household chores. Or my children won't be creating so much of an issue. They will not be very, very naughty. So if those are the things that the client comes up with, again, regardless of what they come up with, we try to bring the focus back to the client and look at how, if the miracle happened, what would be the things that the client would be doing. Now, the context is more or less the same, right? So here, the client wants to have a better relationship with the husband. That's something that we have gauged. Now, how would it be for the client if the husband is more, more listening, or more in tune with what is happening? So what does it feel for the client is something that we keep bringing up, because as much as we want to, it will not be possible for us to change another person. So the change is something we are trying to inculcate in the client who comes to us. And like I said, miracle question, use it only when the goal is not apparent, one. Second, depending on the client also. It is not necessary that it will work with all the people that are around. So yeah, like I was saying, the clients need to have some faith and some imaginative powers to look at how the life will change. And you can also expect different sort of responses where the client can say that things are not going to get better, things are going to stay the same, and there is no point in talking about it. So here again, as clinicians, it will be our job to probe more into it and see how that pans out, right? And yes, most of the time it is, especially when you're in the middle of something extremely, may not be tragic per se, but something that's not that you wanted, it would require a lot of time and assistance to make a shift from the problem thinking to the solution thinking. And for that, as a clinician who practices solution-focused therapy, it would be our job to ensure that we provide sufficient assistance. Now, exception questions, like how I was mentioning, exception questions are the ones that brought solution-focused therapy into being itself. So here we are looking at exceptions in the client's life that are again relevant to the problem at hand. So if the client says that I can't get up early in the morning and I'm lazy, if we are looking for exceptions and say that no, you went for a movie, so it means you're not lazy, that doesn't serve the purpose. So what is it that the client is concerned about because of their perceived laziness or procrastination? That is the area in which we will look for exceptions. And also we will try to talk more about the past exceptions and how the problem was in the previous times also, like as in the problem that the client brought us. Here, how things would have been different. Again, saying again the same example. If let's say the client says that my husband has always belittled me, then they never supported me. So we look for exceptions where has there been times when the husband has been responsible. And if that's the case, what were the issues? So that's where we used these techniques, as in we first elicit. So first we look for, are there instances available where the husband has been responsible or where she perceived the husband to be responsible? And then we build on it. When we amplify, we look for the context. So what was happening when he was responsible? What was the people's response? And then what exactly did he do? And what did it make her feel? And then we are also reinforcing, checking as to, okay, if this situation, the situation of the husband being responsible has to happen more, what all could happen? As in, what are the things that should go right in order for us to replicate this exception? Again, our intention is to bring a little bit more of control in the life of the client, where they don't feel so helpless anymore. So that is reinforcing and exploring how the exceptions happen and projecting exceptions. So the fact that this has happened in the past means that there is a chance that it may happen in the future also. So that is something that we will be stressing more on and looking at how is it that she can contribute to him doing what is required, right? So those are exception questions. Now, scaling questions, it is, as the name suggests, is on a scale of 1 to 10, where the clients are supposed to grade where they are in terms of their issue, the perceived issue that they have. Now, what we believe is that anything mentionable is manageable. So when we are, so 1 would be usually, it's the scenario which is the least desired, and 10 is our desired outcome, the goal. So what we look for is currently, where does the client think he or she is? Is it a 1? Is it a 2, 3, 4? And we also actively look for the reason why they said that they are at a 1 or a 2 or a 3. Then we also schedule a different number. For example, let's say the client said they are at a 2 right now. We try to see where can they be when they come for the next session, where can they be? And what would be the measures that they feel they have to take in order to reach there? So currently they are at 2. Let's say they want to be a 5. So in order to reach the 5, what are the things that they feel they should do? Now, it's not necessary that the person should say that they are at a 2 right now and they want to improve. It's not necessary. So some people may say, some clients may say that they are at a 1. Perfectly fine. If the only issue would be if they say if they are at a 0, then it gives us more opportunity to look into what is it that made them say that they are a 0, because that is not there in the scale at all. And look at realistically appraising themselves and seeing how they can move forward. The same thing goes if they say if they are a 10, because perfection is not humanly possible, so it doesn't make sense. So we try to be realistic and come up with the goals and how to reach there. So being more specific in reaching the goal, small steps is something we look for in the scaling question. Now, presupposing change is, again, when a client is going through sessions and they are regularly attending therapy and doing everything that they can, still, whenever there is something negative happening in one's life, it is very easy, and it is, again, perfectly normal to get caught up with all the negative things that are happening and to sort of miss out, even if small, but the positive things that are happening. So presupposing change is we are assuming that the client would have had some changes since the last session that they came. So when they come for the next session, we are assuming that there has been some change, right? Now, so we ask questions like what's different or better since I saw you last time, where they are made to sort of think about what could have been the positive changes, even if it's small, that has happened. And so here in solution focused therapy, we also believe that if you ask the right questions, you are going to get the right answers. So you'll also find that in solution focused therapy, it is more about the language, and it is recommended that one uses the language that one is comfortable with, the most comfortable with, so that a lot of things doesn't get lost in translation. Now, let's say we suppose change and we are all enthusiastic about asking for what is different and how are things different. But let's say the client says that nothing much has happened, okay, or things are worse. Again, that gives us an opportunity to check as to what do they mean by it, right? So if they say that nothing has changed, now that's a good thing. Things could have gotten worse, but it hasn't. So giving an opportunity for the client to talk about how is it that things are not worse, and what is it that you did to ensure that things didn't get worse, because something would have happened. So depending on what they say, we can again go forward. Or if they say that things have gotten worse, right? Now, then it will be again an opportunity for us to check with them as to what do they mean by that. And if things have gotten worse, again, it's really recommendable that they have still managed to come for therapy, which sort of shows that they still hold on to hope. So how is it that they're able to hold on to hope even when things got worse? So regardless of the answer that they give, it gives us an opportunity to engage in a conversation with the client and to see how it goes, right? And we also look at what are the measures that the client has taken to cope up with whatever it is that has been happening in their life. Now, applications. So we believe that any client who is amenable for therapy is amenable for solution-focused brief therapy. So it has broad applications, and since it is brief, so we have come a long way from needing years and years of therapy. So since it's brief and people are pressed for time a lot these days, and like I said, solution-focused therapy mostly looks at 3 to 5 sessions, brief therapy, I mean. So it is more suited to the contemporary human being, and it has been found to be effective in a lot of client concerns. There is substance abuse, depression, interpersonal difficulties, eating disorders, and my own research in my MPhil was on SFBT, the impact on it on schizophrenia. So there are enough literature currently that talks about how it can also be used in any sort of mental illnesses. But again, the provisos would be that the client has to be in a position where they are amenable for therapy, because unlike certain types of therapy where there is a significant hierarchy between the client and the therapist, SFBT doesn't work that way. So it should be that the client is able to engage in a conversation, engage in the whole process, because the client is an active person, active member in the process of treatment. So that is important. So wherever the client is amenable, SFBT is also something that we have found to be useful, enough and more literature on that. And it has also been found to be useful in a lot of settings, as in it has shown its effectiveness in individual work, group work, families, couples, and all those. So when we look at how SFBT is as compared to or in relation to the other psychotherapies that are around, SFBT is more similar to the psychotherapies or any intervention approaches which focus on the competency of the client, which focus more on the resilience. So in that way, it is very much similar to the strengths perspective, CELIB's strengths perspective, positive psychology or motivation enhancement interviewing techniques, because we give a lot of autonomy, a lot of volition. We acknowledge the volition that a client would have. So that is something we genuinely believe in. And it could also come from the fact that the pioneers, the people who came up with Steve Bishasar, he is a social worker. So we also believe that the focus on the client comes from our profession, where we genuinely believe that the client is someone who has a lot more of control and we don't consider the client to be the helpless person that some of the therapy models would consider them to be. And there are also some similarities between SFBT and cognitive behavioral therapy, but cognitive behavioral therapy does have a bit more of the clinician giving a bit more of guidance and bit more of assisted tasks as compared to solution-focused brief therapy, where the client and the clinician will be working together to see how things can be made better. And like how I was mentioning, SFBT does come under the third wave behavioral part of it, and it has more similarity with narrative therapy, where we take a non-pathology stance. So regardless of what the client, we are not actively looking for transference, and we are not looking for resistance. We are not doing any of that in the SFBT sessions. We are not trying to gauge what the client meant when they said this or did this. No, that's not what we're going to do. We are trying to acknowledge that the client is doing the best that they can, given the circumstances with what they have. And how is it that we can be of support to give them more options, more alternatives, and it comes from a non-pathological stance, regardless of how the client puts it. So in that regard, SFBT doesn't focus or put a lot of weight on the diagnosis of the client. So in that regard, it would be extremely different from a lot of psychodynamic way of approaching things, and where the basic assumption is that the client needs to be saved or helped, and there is a significant power differential. So that is something that would be very different from the way SFBT would look at things. And it is also important to understand that once the client has made a goal, again, it's up to the client if they want to change the goal altogether or make some changes in between, modify it a bit, and then go ahead. So whatever it is that the client wants, that is how it would be going. Having said that, it's in no way saying that the clinician would be a passive observer and then just being there. It will not be that. It is just that we believe in the client's power and resilience to handle their own problems. Yes, and the exceptions again. Solution-focused therapy rests on the focus of exceptions. That regardless of how severe the problem seems, there are going to be exceptions. And if, let's say, we are not able to find any exceptions, we look for options to see whether an exception can be created, an exception can be made with the resources that we have currently, right? So that is how we look for solutions and generate ideas and all that. Yes, that is the session that I had in mind. And this is another tenet that we look for in SFBT, that if something is working, do more of it. And if something is not broken, not fix it, is something that we believe. The Pandora's box, if it cannot be acknowledged and addressed, we don't open the box at all. So if the client comes with an issue, we are going to address that issue, and unless and until the client feels that there are some other things that they would want to address, we will not be actively suggesting that the client change that or work on it, unless the client brings it up. So yes,